Happy Friday, everyone. It is my pleasure to absolutely introduce Michelle Bogan, CEO and founder of Equity at Work. Michelle's mission is to help companies create equitable workspaces and helping leaders to achieve major impact through their diversity, inclusion, and equity work. Michelle's also on the investment committee for the RevTech Equity for Women Fund, investing in women-led startups and retail technology. Michelle previously worked for Accenture, Kurt Salmon, Macy's, and Walt Disney, and consulted with many Fortune 500 companies. So everyone give a warm welcome to Michelle. We look forward to hearing you speak.
Thank you, Miriam. I appreciate the introduction. And I'm so thrilled to be here. I started my business, Equity at Work, about 4 years ago, and out of pure passion, and really started primarily focused on women, and then have expanded into all different aspects of diversity. But I come at this out of 25 years in retail and retail consulting. So supply chain is very near and dear to my heart. Whether working in supply chain or partnering with supply chain folks from more the merchandising, planning, inventory side. So I was thrilled to be asked to be part of the discussion today. So I'm going to share my screen and go through a presentation on how to measure the DEI health of your organization. And then I'm happy to take questions at the end. And you can also please use the chat or the Q&A buttons if you've got any questions that come along, and then we'll catch up on those at the end. So let me share my screen, and hopefully everyone can see that. All right, so let's get, hopefully my buttons will work and we can start. Okay, so measuring the DE&I health of your organization. I feel like this is a great topic for supply chain folks, because so much of supply chain is very metrics oriented. You measure productivity, you measure efficiency, you measure input and output, you measure time. So, I think it's great to take that kind of analytical perspective and say, are there things that we can do from a measurement perspective in the DE&I space to get great insights, to identify new opportunities, and then, use those stories to then help drive new change in an organization. So that's what I'm going to spend some time on. Recently, I would say probably about 6 to 9 months ago, so certainly during COVID and following the George Floyd murder and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and all the things that came with that, diversity, equity, inclusion has become much more top of mind than ever for executives. And I saw this study and it really blew me away, because I've never seen this many CEOs align on anything before. And it was a study done by Forbes, and they said 96% of CEOs that they surveyed said that DE&I are their top strategic priorities. So really in the top 3 to 5 things that they felt were strategic initiatives that their organization needed to focus on. That being said, I would say probably almost none, if really none, feel truly certain in how to deliver that DE&I change successfully. A lot of leaders were brought up with functional expertise in a particular area, and many of us come from generations where you were not supposed to, kind of show your softer side in the workplace. And at first glance, DE&I can kind of fly right in the smack in the face of that, and feel like that's, getting away from efficiency and productivity and great output and being a great contributor. But, what we've learned over time is that actually they go hand in hand, and really by focusing on bringing in and providing great environments for people of all different backgrounds, and perspectives and experiences to come together and work together really is what drives great innovation and drives great engagement and commitment and loyalty. And so that in turn drives all of the great, high measures of output that any organization is looking for. So I thought it'd be great to first sort of step back and say, what are the key ways how do you break apart DE&I into different measures? And so the first is to break down what each of them are really getting at when you're looking at it from a metrics perspective and trying to do this sort of, health checkup, kind of like going to the doctor and see how well you're doing. Diversity, of course, looks at differences across different demographics. So you're measuring the variances across different components. And I like to look at this both in terms of the raw numbers and percentages against each other. It can give you a good sense of, if you just look at the percentage, things can sound very big or small. Having the raw numbers in there gives you a really good perspective on, how the balancing is really playing out. And for diversity, those whatever dimensions you can get at, either through your employment data, leveraging ERGs, any other sort of demographic data that you can compile within your organization, you want to make sure you're slicing your diversity demographics along those different lines of, whether it be gender, age, race, ethnicity, what language is spoken at home, veteran status, differently abled. There are just so many different measures you can do. Sexual orientation, of course, is an important one, although that tends to be more of an opt-in metric, but making sure you're looking at all different dimensions when you think about diversity. And so within that, I really look at the total representation across an organization, and then do these different slices. So looking at what are the differences by level? How does it differ by function? By hourly versus salary, by temporary, seasonal, part-time, full-time, like different shifts. If you're looking at distribution centers or other shift-based organizations, by location. If you look at just look in total, you can get a little bit of a false sense of what the day-to-day really looks like for your employees. But when you get down into these different levels and functions and, slices of the organization, you start to see where some of the blocks are, where people might be getting stuck, people might be getting left behind, or where some great success stories are cropping up. I also like to organize that by line of reporting. So ideally you do those different dimensions based on, if it's the president, the EVP, the SVP, whatever it is. And then you can, a lot of times that's functional, but sometimes you've got multiple functions reporting into like a COO, for example. If you can do that roll up, then you're getting to the point where, the ownership really lies, the discussions on budget and investment really come up, where key decisions on hiring and promotion land. So starting to see how those differences happen across those lines of reporting can really tell a great story as well. And then finally, I do it both in terms of a point in time representation, and then as you go through different hiring phases, making sure you're tracking, the networking you're doing, the outreach you're doing, and how that turns into interviews and hires. And then ideally, as we get into equity inclusion, also looking at, of those new hires, how long are people staying, and what are some of the other, indicators of their career path success? So that's diversity. When you then move into equity, equity to me is all about looking at fairness and different measures of financial value. So equity, a lot of times really, most people think of compensation, of pay equity, but, there are other things that really are indicators that a company is willing to make an investment in its people. So professional development is a great one to look at here. Certainly, promotion trends around time to promotion, what promotions rates are across different demographic groups are really good. And then with that, looking at the leveling that happens. So people may be getting promoted, but if they're being promoted sort of out of sync with one another based on their expertise and experience and whatever they came in with, then you've still got some inequities happening there. And then the final piece is on the pay equity, which is really looking at total compensation is really what you're trying to get at. So many people only focus on base compensation, and that's an important element. But I will say many organizations have done a good job narrowing any discrepancies that happen there into pretty tight bands. Where the discrepancies still happen, especially between women and men, is on the more incentive-based comp, like the additional components of comp that get to the total. So looking at bonus, looking at, like I said, incentives or stock options, looking at any other benefits that are added, that's where you can see a really wide discrepancy between men and women. So when you're looking at pay equity, you've really got to look at all those pieces together. And below that, I've listed, some of the other components that can go into it. So looking at, within professional development, not just the hours, but, what's sort of mandatory versus optional, how many people are able to participate in those optional things, and how many of those hours are done. Are they, again, clustering in different pockets of the organization? So does that show that certain leaders are more encouraging or able to give more time to their employees to be able to make that investment in their development? And then, a lot of different measures related to, ongoing leadership development, and then the compensation and promotion pieces. And all of them, again, circle back to, all the slices I mentioned across the different demographics and, by function, level, location, et cetera, to make sure you're getting the full picture. And then finally, inclusion. And inclusion to me is really where the rubber meets the road in so many of our DE&I initiatives, because if you can bring lots of different people into an organization and have historically been there, but if they don't feel like they've got a place that they belong, and a place where their voice can be heard and they're given opportunities and really, valued for, who they are and what they bring to the table, they're not going to stay. And if they do stay, they're going to get stuck probably at a pretty early stage in their career. And that's not making the advancement that we all need with DE&I. So inclusion, to me, when I measure inclusion, is anything that really gets to belonging and having a long-term, career opportunity in an organization. So looking at tenure, both in total time, but also in different roles and different functions, tells a great story. Looking at turnover, both voluntary and involuntary, and if you've got any reason codes that go with that, to try to even tease out voluntary turnover into a couple different trends and how that may be different by demographic. That's a really good thing to dig into. Looking at engagement scores, different, elements of leave. So, do people take medical or parental leave or any other kind of, benefit that's offered related to leave? How many of them were able to take all of it? How many of them came back? And then what was their career path following taking that leave? So that one I really like to look at in correlation to promotion for women, to make sure that there is no career ding that happens for women who take maternity leave, or for fathers who take paternity leave, that they're able to come back and pace along, with the rest of their cohort, and still, have a reasonable time to be considered for promotion, and ongoing development. So again, looking at all of these in terms of all those demographics that I mentioned earlier, this is also a great place to incorporate engagement survey feedback and get some of those more qualitative components put in. And by having all these different elements, I know this can sound overwhelming, so I'm going to show you some different ways you can do this. What comes of it ideally is a story that, is woven through all of these different dimensions of analysis. And you start to connect the dots between different initiatives that you've tried and other policies and processes in place, elements of your culture. All of this will come out in this data and can give you a great scorecard on the health of your organization from a DEI perspective. So when I started this, probably about 10 or 12 years ago now, the first time I started to think about applying data to the DEI problem, I was inside an organization. I was one of the only female leaders in this consulting firm that I worked for. I was, I think, one of 2 female partners out of about 40. And we had such a hard time, and I experienced this myself, getting women from the manager level up into senior manager, into director, into partner, to have that stick. And I had been a co-founder of our women's network, and it just was making me crazy that it was so hard for me. And even once I made it through, I turned around and it was so hard for me to even sponsor and bring up other really strong women behind me. And in particular, women who were women of color, because our leadership team and our company historically have been very straight white male. So it just, and even though we had a very collaborative and collegial environment, there just was something that was making it particularly tough to make that happen. So we had tried lots of things, but we never really took a close look at the measurements of how this was playing out. And so this came out of total frustration on my part, and I just grabbed an org chart and I said, I'm going to back of napkin figure out how many males to females we have for each level. And this is what it showed. And you can see we did a great job at the entry level and, you know, sort of first, like the entry level, and then the first several years of someone's career, we started to fall down at manager. We picked up a little at senior manager, and then we totally fell apart. And I think the challenge was, until I had this slide, and this slide developed one slide developed a life on its own, which I'll tell you about in a second. You know, until we had this visual, I just think people didn't understand how severe the problem was, and that despite our, you know, hard work and best intentions, we just weren't getting where we wanted to be. And so I took this slide and I showed it to our leadership team, and about half of them almost fell out of their chairs because it flew in the face of really what we as an employer and a brand stood for. It was so contrary to the environment we wanted to build and that we thought we had built, and the opportunities we thought we were creating, to see that it was so hard to get women past that consultant level. And this was not an anomaly at this point in time picture that I took. It was a trend that we'd had for many years and that we actually had improved upon, which is hard to believe. So, you know, this became sort of the key talking point slide that we then used in every town hall meeting, in different offices, that we used to do brainstorming around when we were trying to figure out different solutions. And we started to track this over time and started to see some major progress. But I think until we, you know, had this visual that said, this is not who we want to be, and we had a mechanism to do some tracking against it and show, okay, every 6 months, how are we looking? Is it getting better? We just couldn't, you know, get the focus we needed on improving this problem. So this was super scrappy. This was back of the napkin math off of an org chart that I did, and, you know, and I whipped up a slide, and it drove major change. So there's a lot you can do with just what you can get your hands on, the information that's easily available to you. And scrappy is a great way to start if you don't have something sophisticated put in place, or something that's, you know, easy to get to that is more sophisticated. You don't have to go far to drive change. From there, as I've built out my business focused on DEI, I have gotten more sophisticated, and I'm going to show you several different examples of things I've done with different clients to break out these dimensions. So these examples are, the first one, the representation dashboard, shows how I've broken out, you know, in total, and then where the changes are by level. You can see that male, female, those images again. This organization again has a hard time once they hit that VP level. It's very heavily male. They get a little better and then not great again. By function, you can see large variances. You know, this one has a lot of women in marketing and HR, fewer folks in IT and some of the operations areas. Job classification, so this is the hourly, salaried, and part-time, full-time. Geography, you can see some big differences. And then generationally, you know, also some differences, but that's more of a point of reference to give context to the other elements. And then on the other side, I've got, you know, how I then start to incorporate survey feedback and engagement surveys and other, you know, other instruments that I can use to pull in feedback and that anyone can do very easily through survey work, and cluster those in terms of some of those same areas. So looking at representation, you know, that's a yellow. They've got, you know, some things are okay, some things really need improvement. Recruiting and hiring, compensation, retention, some others are green. They're doing a good job there. The sponsorship and networking, for this particular example, they've got a lot of work to do there. They don't have a formal sponsorship program in place. They don't provide access to networks outside of the organization. They don't do a great job with networks inside the organization. All of those things give context to what you're seeing on the data output on the other side. So they really go hand in hand together to provide, you know, some overarching storylines and really show some areas to dive deeper into. To give a couple other examples, this is taking it out into other dimensions. So then doing a click down into race is really important. Any other dimensions you could get, like I mentioned before, in terms of, you know, differently abled, sexual orientation, veteran status, et cetera, all are great things to look at. Anywhere you can show some trends over time also tells a great story, because, you know, there are economic impacts, business impacts, other things you want to consider. especially also if you did a big investment in, doing a different kind of recruiting or put a sponsorship program in place or change some of the metrics that are measured internally, you want to see what the impact was to that, that work made over time. And then these representation drivers, I think, are so important. So these are some of the things I mentioned in the first slide, but showing through examples of, some compensation variances, for example. And this looks at male, female, and non-binary folks, what the average base difference was. So for every dollar a gentleman makes, a woman is making 87 cents on the dollar, a non-binary person is making 90 cents on the dollar. And then looking at total comp then factors in those other components I mentioned before, and again, shows the variance. And that's for this one also, that's where more of the variance started to show up. So this gives you an example of all the different ways you can slice and dice some of the data. The other thing I like to do is, and this is a great exercise to go into if you are an organization that has a lot of different facilities, either in different countries or in different regions around the states, and you're trying to do local level hiring in particular, or have some sort of effort that contributes back into the local environment. It's great to do some reads on how you stack up against your local city and county data. So this is an organization that was trying to see, how representative they were from a race perspective. They also did gender and some other measures. This example is on race. They, had some variances that they wanted to try to address over time compared to the city they were located in and the broader county that they also drew from. So I'm seeing more and more people start to look to this data just to give them a bit of a grounding in who's out there. You can also do, you can do some nice analytics with this census or Bureau of Labor Statistics data also to dig in specifically to, do I want to compare to just, a certain age group or a certain, people that are, of certain professional classifications. There are ways to get actually fairly specific if you feel that would be valuable to you. So there's a lot of rich data. All of that is free, easily accessible, pretty easy to work with and manipulate. So that can be a great way to ground yourself in, how well am I reflecting my community as well. One thing I'll add to this that is not in here, but I am doing a lot of work with clients on, I think there's a lot of interest here too for a large organization, is doing something similar from a supplier diversity standpoint. So it's another way to look at, of the broader community that we serve, are we giving back to that? Are we giving our dollars to different, diverse organizations or organizations that match our DE&I goals? So that can be another component of a scorecard that you build to measure the health of your organization. And then finally, the other example I wanted to share is, as I said, it can be a little bit mind-blowing to think of how do I pull all these different measures and metrics and information together in one place. And this is an example that shows how you can incorporate branding elements to have a scorecard that's, visually compelling, that, kind of aligns with your brand and your messaging and pulls in some different visuals that, just really bring it to life. And you'll see on the side here, there's under dashboards, this is a gender equity measure, but you can do a click through so that it's not so much information at once, but you can click through and have all these different lenses pop up to show the different things that you're looking for. And then of course with this, the other thing that's great is once you've got all this data, you can create many different views. So you'll have a very executive summary level version that maybe goes out to town halls and goes to some of the executive team, maybe it's even used with your board or with key investors. You'll have very deep dives for human resources and for other operating leaders who are making decisions around kinds of investments and they're part of the organization. And then maybe you pull out some key elements for different ERGs and other, sort of interest groups to really dig into and do some problem solving around. So you don't have to have everything available to everyone. You want to certainly have security and confidentiality. And you want to make sure that it's very digestible and it's all very action oriented, but there are lots of great ways to do that. I also have helped people, create this on Tableau or other BI tools so that you can do updates easily, pretty real time, have those connected on the back end to your any of your sort of HRIS systems that you've got. So there are a lot of creative ways. And then if you have it live, you can sort of real time click in and out of different dimensions and do more what ifing scenarios. If you increase this, what's going to happen down the road and so forth. You can do some pretty cool scenario work with the data as well. So all of these things help get to, what is the ROI I'm getting out of my DEI investment? And this is a terrific way to do that tracking, to get a baseline and then start to track going forward where you're getting the biggest payoff, and then where to focus in on some key opportunities, once you've got this sort of the story told and you found the dots to connect through this analysis. So with that, I will switch over to, I will stop sharing my screen. I'm happy to, connect with anyone offline if you have, deeper questions or want to, tell me more about your organization, but I will switch over and go to the chat. This is my contact information. If you want to email me, you can also go to my website, which is www.equity-at-work.com. And I'm happy to service you there, but I will stop sharing my screen and take any questions that anybody has. And Miriam or Rocky, do you want to go through questions or do you want me to do the chat?
Yeah,
about 10 minutes.
Do we have Miriam? Are you still here with us?
Yep, I'm still here. I actually had a
Wonderful.
question myself around supplier diversity.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on how to canvas, like maybe your local area or even internationally, if you're looking for diverse suppliers? So what do you think qualifies as a diverse supplier? Is it like a certain percentage or?
Yeah, I mean, so there is census data in the States. It's not, it's only refreshed about every 10 years on that updates. If you're a, what they would call a minority-owned business, or that you would qualify as a diverse supplier. I think the last data was done in 2012. So hopefully next year we'll get an update to that, because it is pretty outdated at this point. But you can pull that data, you'll have a sense of, you can do it by state. You may even be able to do it at the county or city level, but you can get a sense of how many local suppliers in your area are minority-owned business, and they even designate veteran-owned versus non, and then they will do it by race and gender. Largely, those are people who have gone through a certification process, either like as a women-owned business enterprise or Black-owned business, or there are a lot of different chambers that help with the certification processes that are focused on different demographic groups that they're trying to support and getting them exposure to getting that business. So going to your local chamber of commerce is a great way to get that contact information. Looking at those certification organizations, they usually have portals that you can search in to find, based on what you're looking for, recommended suppliers that you can ask to do bidding. And then there are also portal solutions out there. If you wanted to build a database internally to make sure that everyone within your organization had a way to get to diverse suppliers that you're finding, there's some great, they're kind of like online direct, cloud-based, directories, almost like a CRM tool that's internal, that tracks all the information, and then you can do some governance around that, like what qualifies as someone, how do we get them sort of internally certified. But then there's a central database that you can have available to pull from across all the different operating divisions that are looking for suppliers of services, of goods, of materials. I mean, all kinds of different things. So there are a lot of ways to definitely go at that.
Yeah, thank you for your answer.
You're welcome.
I'm going to check the chat to see if there are any questions.
There was one comment about supply chain having a long road ahead for gender equality at all leadership levels. That definitely is true. There are some recent studies that were co-sponsored by Gartner and some done in collaboration with Awesome Leaders, which is a women's organization to support supply chain leaders. show that there has been progress, but I would say there's still a long way to go. And I think what's interesting in the research I've seen from Gartner, both on women and on sort of a broader DE&I lens, is there's been a bit of an overemphasis on the diversity component, but not as much on the inclusion and equity. And so what happens is, which basically means there's a lot of recruiting of people from all kinds of different, backgrounds and experiences, but then there hasn't been the focus to make sure that those people can show up as themselves at work, that there's belonging, that there's, that they've got all the inclusion components there. They've got an equal chance at advancement, the equal chance at professional development, and so forth. And the equity might be a bit off as well, because then they can't stay as long-term. So I think companies now who've tried just focusing on hiring as the key lever are understanding it can't just be that. And so now there's been a bit of a swing over to, we've really got to focus on the belonging and creating the, visibility internally and the acceptance and really nurturing and growing all these folks that we're bringing in, because it doesn't just, work out for them to naturally stay. There was a reason we weren't like that already, and it tends to be a cultural reason. So just taking a really close look at that as part of it has become more important.
I did have a question around childcare. Do you feel the pandemic has leveled the playing field somewhat with some remote work, with making it easier for parents to be able to move up the corporate ladder and still be able to fulfill their obligations at home?
Unfortunately, I would say no. I wish it were true, but from what I see, I talk to so many people at so many companies about this all the time. And if anything, what's happened is, so the upside of I shouldn't say upside, the one piece of silver lining of this pandemic has been that all the illusions about, all of us being able to neatly organize our personal lives and our professional lives into these very discrete silos has totally been blown away. So now I think there's a much better understanding that, when support for childcare is needed is not just when the baby is born or brought into a family, but it goes through age 18 and sometimes well beyond that. People are helping aging parents or ill parents or other family members also need very similar support. But with the shift to so much remote work, I think that the thought process, and some of this is, I think all of us trying to still sort of make the best of this really difficult situation, has been that all of us are now working all the time, and we're having to do family care, all the time, especially if your, school shut down or your childcare facility shut down. And all of those haven't been able to come back in full force because we still have, a lot of people getting sick, people, resisting vaccination or mask wearing, all different things are still, going on. So there's still a lot of pressure out there. And I think because still, unfortunately, women tend to bear the brunt of, the caretaking in the home and caretaking in the family, while that's not all on women, still it's majority on women in total. Women are feeling a hit to their careers, or they're just feeling so burned out from having to juggle all of it for so long. They feel like they want to make the choice to scale back their career, even though they in the short term, even though that means they probably will take a long-term hit as well. So a lot of women have been forced into really tough situations. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to see this play out over the next several years, that we're going to have even fewer women probably advance into leadership roles as a result. The bright spot in that is companies are seeing that they really have a dire need, especially if they want to retain people and attract great talent, that they have to provide solutions for this. So it is leading to a lot more flexibility in workplace hours, workplace location, people understanding that can be more activity-based. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing based on your role, that you can sort of, flex in and out at different times of day, different days, with your team, sort of balance that. And I do think also employers are understanding they've got to provide a more flexible pool of hours for anyone to be able to pull from for any kind of medical or family or personal need, not have it be quite so locked up in PTO versus medical versus, family emergency, whatever. So I think we're getting some great solutions that are coming, but it's still taking some time for that to happen, and certainly to happen consistently.
Thank you for your answer. We do
Yeah.
have a question in the chat from Dr. Kevin Lyons. What are the best public or private databases that we can use to find suppliers with their supplier diversity classification data? I have noticed that many public and private databases don't have the supplier data assigned to suppliers with that information up to date.
That is true. So I would start with, if you go to your local city chamber of commerce, they should have a list of, first of all, other chambers that are focused on supporting, a given minority group. So I live in Dallas, for example. So if I go to the Dallas City of Commerce, Chamber of Commerce website, I will find links to the India Chamber of Commerce, the Black-owned Business Chamber of Commerce, women's, a women's certification organization that is sort of like a virtual chamber of commerce. That's a great place to start. You can certainly go to search up minority business certification programs, and all of those will have websites and identification of any local chapters, but many of them have national portals as well as local portals. And then let me look at a note I made, because I did have a contact share with me a new resource that I did not know about, which is an external portal. I'm not gonna be able to find it now. But if you search up Supplier Diversity Portal, you will find there are some different software solutions out there that do create these internal directories. And you'll see a lot of companies that are sponsors of this or big users of this. And those can be great places to start too, to see how they're doing the classification. This is a space where it's kind of been a grassroots effort for many, many years. And I feel like it's finally coming to the forefront that, all of us have, while we, yes, can, influence and change things internally, we have an equal opportunity to use our, our spend, our dollars, the weight of our brand names, recognition to do the same externally. And building a great supplier diversity program is a really great way to do it, because you have a chance to influence and impact just so many people beyond your organization. I know we're almost at time, but one other thing I'll mention with that is one of the challenges in this is many minority-owned businesses are also small businesses. And so they don't necessarily have a lot of easy access to capital. They may not be able to meet your standard terms on, accounts receivable and some of the other things that, a large corporation can set up, and even some of the banking terms and things like that. So if you're going down this path, I would encourage you to figure out where you can make some exceptions, or maybe you carve out some things to help some of those folks get on board and, and give them the opportunities so they do get a chance to be lifted up. Because those hurdles are a big thing for a small business, but many of them, if they can just get in and start working, they can then clear those hurdles down the road. So it's really about, sort of putting yourself in their shoes about, the things they need to even help get started with you.
Thank you for that answer.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions? Feel free to jump in. Hi, Rocky.
Hi.
I think she's going to say we're out of time.
No, I mean, this has been such a great session. Michelle, thank you so much. I just wanted to take this opportunity and extend my regards to you, and thank you for partnering with us for the summit this year. What an eye-opener, right? I mean, till you actually see the data and the numbers, it really doesn't really bring it home, right? Mm-hmm. The numbers actually make the whole big difference. So thank you for all the insights and the great work that you're doing in this space. And hopefully, this conversation today will be an eye-opener for others as well who are attending, and basically give us a reason to actually do a little bit more than what we do and think about in this space, right? So Thank you very much again for your time and your partnership with us today.
My pleasure, absolutely. And I will say I'm happy. This world of DEI data can feel very overwhelming. So if anyone needs, a few minutes just to talk through how to do it, I'm happy to be a resource to you. I showed my email earlier. You can go to my website and contact me. The other thing I'll mention is I do, just as an ongoing free resource to my clients and other DEI contacts and colleagues, I host what I call DEI deep dives every 1 or 2 months on different topics. Supplier diversity is one of my upcoming topics, actually. If you go to my website, you can sign up for those. And I always, post on LinkedIn and, try to get the word out. They're free. They're about an hour. And I'm trying to sort of do what I can to share the resources I come up with. And this is an area where it really takes a village to make a difference. So, I feel like for all of us, and Rocky for, organizing this the same, the more we can get all this out there for everyone to start using, the bigger difference we can make. So happy to be a small part of that. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a big thing, right? Every step and every action counts. That's what we've been hearing, learning, and that's what makes us better allies, right, of each other. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much. We can close the session with this thought. Big thank you to you, and that we have our energy break built up now, so we can get up, get motivated. It's a guided video session on meditation. I have personally seen it. I had the privilege to see it ahead of time. But please, I would encourage everyone to go join that link and go through. It's a 6 minutes video, not a big video, but it will really energize you and it's really help you in getting your thoughts together, calming you down, and just get re-energized for our next session that will follow the energy break, which is up close and personal chat with Dr. Pierre Theodore from J&J. I'm very excited about that, to sit together with him and learn more about the race to health equity and what does it really mean, right? So I'm leaving you with that thought. Let's take a very quick break and then join at 2:10 at the fireside chat without the fire in the virtual environment and learn what really race to health equity is all about. So with that, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you.